Hi everyone, and welcome again to Trader Talks. I'm Ian MacDonald, and I'm going to be speaking today with a couple of people from our business here at Trader Corporation who are very well versed in the subject of dealership websites. So that's your own website as a dealership. We're going to be talking about some of the reasons why you need to have a high-performing website for your business, what you should be looking for in terms of choosing a website vendor partner, and then some of the ins and outs about optimizing and maintaining that website, some of the things you should be looking at. So lots of great practical tips in this edition of Trader Talks for your dealership website. And I'm being joined today by Matt Lawson and Mike Kolinsky. So by way of introduction, Matt Lawson is the VP of Dealer Software and OEM. Matt has worked and lived inside the automotive business his whole life, and he's been with us here at Trader Corporation for over 15 years. Matt has a deep understanding of dealership operations and the software that dealers use to power functional areas of their business. Matt also leads all Tier 3 programs with OEM partners for Trader Corporation. Hello, Matt, and happy Friday.
Thanks, Ian. It's great to be here, and happy Friday.
And your second time with us here on Trader Talks, so you're an alumni.
It is. I think I'm entering D-level celebrity status at this stage. Am I not? All the views you're getting on these videos. That's good. Thanks.
Exactly right. And we're happy to have you back. And then also, as I mentioned, so we have Mike Kolinsky. Mike is the Vice President of Product Software. He's got a background in mechanical engineering, smart guy. He's worked in the AI space in the early 2000s, well before it was cool, after which he moved into online applications development and finally into digital marketing. He joined us in digital marketing. So he's been with Trader for over 6 years, where he's held multiple positions, and he's been working closely with the sales supporting software solutions, marketplace commercial products. Now he owns product and software engineering for dealer websites and SEO solutions. So it speaks for itself why we've got Matt here today, since we're talking about dealer websites and SEO, obviously a huge component of that. Hello, Mike. How you doing?
Hey, how's it going, Ian? Hey, Matt. Good to see you again.
Good to see you, Mike.
All right, good stuff. Thanks very much for joining me, guys. So we are recording this on the 17th of April, 2020. And we are right in the midst of obviously the very unique COVID-19 situation here in Canada and around the world. I think today, we want to take a little bit of a step back from that. There's obviously a lot of content that us and others have been producing on that kind of subject. We just wanted to talk about something more general, obviously an evergreen subject, dealership websites, and obviously in places where it's relevant, we'll be talking to the current situation, but a lot of great information in here for any time and any situation if you are a dealership these days. And if you are a dealership these days, you do need a website. So lots of relevant stuff. With that said, I think we'll get straight into it. So, first things first, you guys, obviously both of you spend a lot of time working with dealers, talking to them about their website needs. And for those customers that we have, making sure that their websites are delivering optimally for them and bringing great value to their business. But to back it kind of right up to the basics for a second, dealership website, what is the importance of a dealer having their own website these days? Like, what is the role of it in the user journey as far as we see? Because obviously there's a number of ways for dealers to market themselves, online, offline, there's marketplaces. What's the importance and the role of their own dealership website? I think maybe Matt will go to you first with that one.
Sure. Dealership websites obviously play a critical role in the digital strategy. But I think that, the role that they play is it's the first opportunity for the dealer to be able to express what their brand means to a consumer. Most consumers, based on our consumer research, informs us that typically when the consumer gets to the dealer website, they're literally within a handful of days of making the purchase, right? Most of the research is done upstream in other environments while they're looking to assess what vehicle they want, how much they want to pay, what's available in market programs and so forth. But when they're on that dealer website, they are really at the point of deciding who they're going to transact with. And so the dealer has the opportunity, once they capture that traffic in their website, to inform them on what their brand means. So what different types of services do they offer? Are they a family-run business? Have they been in the same location for many, many years? Or are they part of a larger enterprise with multiple locations, access to more inventory, selection? Are they in an auto mall? These are types of messages that dealers can and should be communicating to people once they get into the dealer website. Those are important factors that are going to help to inform a buying decision. And so being able to communicate effectively what it means to transaction with the store, I think critically important. Also, because that the traffic that's coming into their website is near that the purchase part of the process, creating an experience that gets them into the inventory that's easy to find, search tools to be able to refine their searches and look at the particular vehicles that they may be interested in. And then moving them into or closer to the transaction. What sort of tools are there to be able to build trust and inform the consumer, whether that's OEM programs, lease, finance options, payments, APR terms? All of those things are very important to consumers. So we believe, as you know, that you need to be able to provide that to the consumer once you have them there in that environment. You've got a captive audience and provide that information, and that should help you further them through to the next step, which is the transaction.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I'll say I'll maybe just add to that. From a technical nature, really, it's kind of the epicenter of their marketing efforts online, digitally, right? So it's an extension of their marketing efforts. It's the foundation that everything really kind of pivots off of, from a dealer perspective, from their marketing efforts. So whether it's programmatic SEM, SEO, etc., everything is really directed to that epicenter, and it's a conversion tool. Right, so it's it's a tool that should be used to to essentially contact consumers. Re-engagement tool also. So in a nutshell, I see that as a kind of foundational, basic kind of element for their marketing.
Can I just build on that, Ian? A comment that Mike just made. Conversion tool. It absolutely is a conversion tool. But I have found, and I don't know what you guys think, but what I've found is, and I visit a lot of dealer websites, some of them I've been on recently, and maybe it's because of everyone's trying to move to this sort of touchless or sort of virtual transactional sort of communication strategy. But some of the sites I've been on recently, I find that I can't move around this site. I've got things popping up at me on the screen, things flying out from the side of the screen. It's trying to grab me and pull me in. And from a user experience, I find that to be less of a great experience. I want to get into and look at the inventory, and I don't want stuff popping up and trying to chase me down around the screen. That actually wants to drive me away off the site, I find. So I think, one of the things that we need to be having discussions with dealers about is a nice, clean, smooth experience. Let's communicate our value proposition. Let's provide tools that have transparency so we can build trust, but let's not smother the consumer, because I'm finding that all of these different widgets and tools is very smothering like to the consumer. I don't know what you guys think.
Yeah, well said. Specifically now, what I can say to that is, and the direction I'd give to dealers is ensure that you've got a consistent, very clear message. Ensure that the message is empathic, specifically right now in the situation that your consumers are going through, and ensure it's clear. The other thing is, focus on and we'll go into this. Some of the data that we're starting to see is a extension of the consumer journey. So it's becoming longer. Consumers have now more time. They're doing more research. So dealers have to work on building a relationship with their consumers. Previously, it was a very or heavily focused towards making the sale. Now a consumer is probably more reluctant to make that decision immediately, and guaranteed they're visiting multiple sites. They extending their search criteria. So you've got to build that relationship, and that engagement facility, that engagement point across the dealer websites needs to ensure that that the message is as it should be.
Yeah, so lots of good stuff in there, guys. That's awesome. It's interesting what you were saying about it represents the dealer, and it is almost like that focal point towards the end of the journey. And even with offline stuff, right? So if those dealers that do offline things, we know that the vast majority, well, over 90% of users, they use the online as a channel, as a predominant channel through the purchasing journey. And so however they become aware of the dealer, be it via a marketplace or their own marketing, or as I said, even the offline stuff, they're going to wind up doing a bit of research online around that dealership if they're serious, right? If there's a vehicle that they're interested in, they're going to wind up at the dealer's website. So you're right, it's kind of that focal point towards the end, and that kind of mirrors what we see with the marketplace, which is, and it just stands to reason. Earlier on in the journey, users come to the marketplace first off. They want to compare, they want to aggregate. That's the value proposition. That's the shop window. And that's where you grab the user's attention with great merchandised inventory at competitive prices and all that good stuff. And then as we see the users kind of move through the stage, they're sort of jumping between dealer websites and back to the marketplace and the dealer website. And then towards the end, they're down to like a couple of actual pieces of metal that they're interested in. And it's, this dealership and another dealership perhaps. And that's where they're spending a bit more time on the dealership's website, right? Because the kind of market research aggregation selection phase is kind of more complete. So you're right. It's at that point where like, okay, it's time to convert. How do we get them off the computer or the phone and kind of into the store or having a conversation anyway? Obviously not into the store as we speak right now. It's more of the conversation piece. So speaking of that, actually, in these kind of times, and you sort of touched on it a little bit there, but I don't know if you guys saw some of the research that we had back earlier on this week, and we published it on go.trader and in some other places. But one of the really interesting things was, to your point, what we can see from our consumer research is that during these times, there's still a lot of demand in the market, but they're spending a lot longer researching for obvious reasons, because they don't want to be leaving the house, or maybe there's a financial concern where they don't want to put pen to paper as soon as they would have done. And so that research showed us that there was actually a decrease in users' likelihood to visit dealer websites and OEM manufacturer websites as well. And quite a marked increase in the likelihood to visit a marketplace. Actually, marketplace has now become by far sort of the top source. So I think I was going to ask you kind of why you think that is, but I think we're sort of on the same page about why that is. It's because the research phase and all that stuff, and that's where marketplaces play. But I suppose my bigger question to you would be, do you think that that's just like a temporary effect of the COVID-19 situation, or do you think it's something that actually could last beyond the COVID piece, or is it just a temporary thing?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question. So one can start to draw on specific analogs. Maybe what I'll do is I'll kind of take you guys through a bit of a journey, looking back at what happened in 2008, kind of what we saw. Canada wasn't really hit with the 2008 financial crisis, or at least not as bad as in the States. But it's a really good analog to start to look at. And the States went through a pretty critical time at that time. Over 2,000 dealers closed their doors. That's roughly about 4.4% of the dealers. 2,000 dealers, their franchise status was cut, and 20,000 dealers closed the doors. Right, so it was a massive shock to the system. But when you start to take a look at what happened through, from 2009 to 2010, the dealerships that were the most successful that actually came out of that were focused on optimizing the inventory, specifically, obviously, around vehicle turn time. So you started to see a decrease. I think the average on used car turn times was around 57 days, and it decreased by around 2 days or so as we came out into 2010. The other thing that we saw with consumers at that time is they started to look at more captive finance rates. So, dealers that that provided that level, or financing to consumers, they're the ones also that we started to see that were successful coming out of this. So that's kind of what we saw in 2008. Right now, so looking at China as potentially as an analog of what can be expected and what we can see with consumer behavior. China shut down 5 cities in January. We started to see a slowdown going into year end in 2019, you look at CPI rates and so forth. Vehicle sales were already going down in China, and in January when they started to shut down their cities, their vehicle sales dropped by 80%. I think Kia reported 94% drop in January. So obviously, complete dry out of consumers looking for vehicles at that time, a crucial time. JP released right now kind of results, where you look at, so what are we seeing with month over month kind of in March for the month of March with year over year with 2019. Canada is actually underperforming the globe right now. So we're seeing 46% lower sales than what we saw in March 2019. The US is actually 39% down, right? So Canada has been hit harder. Western Europe obviously hit the hardest, 53% down. So
do you think that's due to the kind of lockdown thing, Mike? That in the US, absolutely, there's more dealerships still open, right? Fundamentally.
Absolutely, right. And we shouldn't confuse, and this is why this is important, that we shouldn't confuse the lockdown with mobility, right? So consumers are still mobile. There's still traveling happening inside Canada. There's still traveling happening inside the States. But there is this, there's a large cohort of consumers that have now been removed out of market. They're not looking for vehicles. They're not browsing for vehicles. This is kind of what we're starting to see inside the data, is that more of the consumers that are actively looking, that are looking to transact, they are still in market. And the ones that were browsing, they've kind of been removed from the market.
Okay.
So, the original question is, so how long can this continue? There's different models. No one really knows. You could look at this kind of multi kind of classification kind of model, where you're going through a lockdown, then you're going to go through kind of a reopening stage, then you're going to go into kind of like a shielding stage where there's still there's still social distancing, and then you're going to go into an exit stage. Hopefully that's driven by a vaccine, some kind of a cure. Actually, on that note, Gilead Sciences released a potential of a cure with their malaria drug or something like that yesterday. So things are starting to look a little bit positive. But so essentially, I mean, what we're saying is, you could be, with the lockdown stage lasting about 2 to 3 months, the reopening stage maybe about 2 to 4 months. Shielding stage, let's say about 12 to 18 months, and then that would take us kind of to the exit stage, which would be, January, June 2021, where you'd see kind of a reverse to normalcy with consumers. I'm a little bit more pessimistic, I think, with how consumers come out of this, and that is, I think this will have a generational impact on consumers, specifically the young consumers. I think we'll see saving rates go up. So consumers and specifically, like, this is the first time millennials have been laid off, right? This is the first time in Silicon Valley, you've got people being laid off and they don't have 5 job offers waiting for them.
Yeah.
Right. So I think it's going to have a major impact on just the perception of life, for millennials. So
there's no doubt about that. Yeah.
So maybe I'll end it there.
I guess one thing that would be interesting to me, actually, just you were talking, I was thinking there. So I mean, you're in a great position, Mike, where across the different websites that Trader offers to dealers, right? You're obviously overseeing all of that, so you can see that in aggregate, kind of what's happening from a traffic standpoint and all that kind of thing. And I was just interested because I was thinking how that kind of compares against what we're seeing over on the marketplace, which is, as we published a few different health updates, at its worst, a couple of weeks back, I think it was sort of, minus 15, 20% year over year. Actually, the marketplace is sort of, it's been growing the past couple of weeks, been improving to the point where, I think it's probably around minus 10% year over year for visits now, but the VDPs are booming, and there's still a lot of engagement on it. How does that compare to what you've seen on the dealer website side of things in terms of in aggregate visits and uniques and that kind of stuff?
100%. Yeah. So you're absolutely right. Marketplace is outperforming from a traffic perspective with dealer websites. So when we look at, you mentioned kind of year-over-year traffic. When we look at kind of pre and post virus, and specifically the lockdown, which was around kind of March the 14th or so, or that's when it was announced as a global pandemic. On the website side, we're seeing a decrease of around 35% in organic traffic. Right. So when we remove all the marketing spend, SEM spend, programmatic, and just look at kind of the basis organic traffic, it's around about 35%. It differs a little bit per province. Alberta, obviously, a little bit harder hit, just because obviously there's the energy sector has been hit also. But on average, you can say about 35%. On the marketplace, it's outperforming that. So again, pre and post, it's roughly around 20-25% down. But compared to the 35%, it's definitely outperforming.
So it kind of stacks up with the research, right? Like it kind of stacks up with what we were just seeing. And obviously, research is research. It's what consumers say or report rather than, sort of quantitative data. But it kind of stacks up, right? So they're saying they're spending a bit more time on marketplaces, spending longer in that research phase, less at the sort of lower end, the business end of the funnel, where there's more dealer website visitation going on. So I mean, it's always good when the facts kind of stack up with the research, right?
100%. I can give some other anecdotal kind of evidence, which is really interesting. So on the paid side, so where we're seeing the biggest hit was on SEM and programmatic marketing, and that's because it's the easiest thing to cut, easiest expense to cut. So we've seen roughly about 67% decrease in traffic coming from paid channels to dealer websites, and that's across Ontario and Quebec. In BC, it's a little bit less. So in BC, we've seen about 40% decrease. And then Alberta actually is the most resilient when it comes to paid marketing. We're seeing only about 25% decrease there. What's very curious, and this speaks to that cohort of consumers leaving the market, is that we've seen a double in conversion rates on paid marketing channels.
Oh, right.
So just to be very clear, not in the sum of conversions, but conversion rates. So those people that are in market, that have come from a paid channel, are converting at double the rate they were before. On organic terms or inorganic terms, we're seeing about a 50% improvement in conversion rates.
Right, because if you're searching and visiting the dealer website, you got to buy.
Exactly. This is the thing. It also, and so the kind of the caveat that I'll pull out of there is, you're seeing a lot of industries pull marketing spend, and it's getting cheaper to advertise now, right? You're not in direct competition with multiple different other advertisers, so your costs are going down. You're getting in front of the people that are actually in market, so you're getting higher conversion rates. So from an efficiency, a cost per lead, cost per VDP, whatever efficiency standard you're looking at, it makes absolute sense right now to be advertising. As a matter of fact, what I've been saying is, dealers should actually be increasing their marketing spend, because you're getting in front of the right people and it's cheaper to advertise now.
Right. So it could be an opportunity in that sense, right? Or at least sounds like it.
100%. I will add one last thing here. Sorry, I'm taking up a lot of time, but
no, it's all good stuff.
The silver lining, what we've seen over the last week, is actually an increase in traffic, so organic traffic. So, as I said, we saw that 35% decline after like March the 14th. It's kind of been it's been stable. It's been slowly trending down up until when we look at week over week traffic. We've seen a 30% increase in week over week. So this week, actually, consumers are starting to come back in.
Right. Yeah. And it's a similar thing that we've seen on the marketplace as well. Obviously, those searches and those search engines, and then, everybody gets a piece of that. And that mirrors what we've been seeing on the marketplace as well. So, yeah, I guess, maybe it's cautiously optimistic that it's kind of, at least from the consumer demand standpoint, it's starting to show some signs of recovery, maybe. And I do know also from the other research that we've been doing that, we measured the consumer confidence and the intent to buy. And obviously, that took a bit of a hit right at the beginning, but that's kind of stabilized now as well, where each week, you're intending to buy it. It's it's not dropping anymore for sure. If anything, it's looking like it's starting to recover a little bit, and that would be borne out by more users searching Google and other search engines with car-related terms, right?
Yeah. Another anecdotal piece, it was the day before yesterday. I saw the first email. I'm in BC, and first email of a luxury dealer group actually opening up. They put out a message saying, our doors are open. We've closed. We never expected to be closed, but now we're open. We're practicing social distancing. Sales is open, service is open. Come and do business with us.
Okay.
Yeah, just to comment, guys, well, I'm listening to you guys chat about this. It's all very interesting stuff. I've been exploring myself just this week, getting inside of looking at what consumers are saying in the leads that they are submitting on dealer websites.
Oh, yeah.
And the intent is there. It's real. I was in a conversation with a dealer group this morning. I was telling Mike earlier today, they've got lots of rooftops, okay, so big group. And what they are coming to learn is that some of the stores that took immediate action in mid-March and furloughed some sales folks and really skinnied down because they had to, fair enough. But some of the ones in their group that had not and kept some people in the sales environment, that is the store. Those are the stores that are actually producing sales right now versus the ones that are relying on the general manager or the sales manager, because it's been a lot of years since GMs and sales managers have been chasing up leads, right? And trying to close deals. Whereas the sales guys on the floor, guys and girls, that's what they do all day long. You give them a lead, they run it down. And looking and just exploring some of the leads and the words that are being said or written from the intenders is they're real buyers,
Mm-hmm.
and I was looking at one today and somebody said it was an AMG, a Mercedes AMG 2017. So there's real money in that car, right? And the opening line was, I'm interested in purchasing this vehicle. It doesn't get any better than that. So the question to the dealer is, what are you doing with this individual? When's the appointment, right? How are you going to navigate practicing social distancing? What are the next steps?
That's where we come into our
real
last
buyer
conversation.
and a car with real money.
Yeah, we come into that last conversation that you and I had on that video panel, where we were saying about that kind of thing. Is like, that's the time to be, here are the services that I offer, which are, nice and safe during these times, whether it's kind of drop off for test drive or home delivery or all that kind of stuff. You're right, because it's like, the person wants to purchase, okay, there's some barriers and some safety stuff that just means they can't do it in the traditional way. That's the time to pivot and communicate, well, okay, we can still get this done. Here's the services that we offer.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay, that's great. So, I mean, I guess my summary from that would be like lots of interesting stuff and trends that we're seeing, but it sounds like maybe some sort of, reasons for kind of cautious optimism anyway about there's still some buyers in the market and maybe demand's picking up a little bit after a rough few weeks. So we'll watch that one closely. But moving on from the COVID thing and back to, I guess, dealership websites kind of overall, one of the things I was going to ask you is, so lots of people watching, they run a dealership or they work in a dealership, they have their website. Now, listen, I think, we know as kind of digital people that one of the great things about digital is its measurability and metrics and all that good stuff that we can optimize towards. But at the same time, sometimes you can get kind of, paralysis by analysis. I mean, my word, the number of things that you can track in terms of performance for a website or a digital campaign for that matter is mind-boggling sometimes. So for those people kind of watching and they have their own website, what would you say are sort of the key metrics that somebody who's responsible for that website should be studying to make analysis kind of manageable and for the insights to be action driven? You know what I mean? Like, what would be your kind of hit list, top 3 or 4 things that you say you got to watch this metric on your website to know how it's performing?
Yeah, I'd maybe say it's the conversion rates, right? And the 2 most important, kind of in order of priority, it would be your product views, which are your VDPs per session, would be the most important. And then second to that would be leads per session, right? And then you can start, and it shouldn't change. Like these metrics should be the metrics that you've been looking at historically. They should not change. So your process shouldn't change, metrics shouldn't change. One can start to drill down further into that. You can start to take a look at obviously your multi-channel attribution, your data-driven models in that, it's not just a VDP, is it an engaged VDP? So you can start to go down a very detailed kind of analysis. But to keep it, key performance indicators, your KPI, just those two are the ones that I'd recommend. Like keep them front and center, VDPs per session, leads per session.
You know what I would add to that, Ian, is from an operator point of view, if you're running a dealership and you know that VDPs are important from a standpoint of understanding when a particular vehicle has enough exposure and engagement to reach that probabilistic range of selling. But looking at your VDPs at a sort of segment level, for instance, if you're running a GM dealership, are you actually tracking what percentage of VDPs are being distributed to different types of inventory? And then contrasting that with how are you sitting in the inventory? Holding costs right now are really important to dealer operators. Are you getting a disproportionate amount of viewability against a subset of inventory or not? Right? So if in the GM example, if you're sitting with a stockpile of Equinox product and the percentage of VDPs is below, say, the Silverado or some other nameplates that you might have, then you have a fundamental problem with how you're attracting audiences and bringing that audience through to that inventory that you've got a stockpile of. Those are insights that dealers can glean once you start looking at those metrics that Mike just shared.
Yeah, absolutely. That's such an important point to make. Yeah, about the not all VDPs are equal and stuff like that, and obviously different vehicles and pieces of inventory, and each of them have a different number of VDPs that are tracked, and like you said, they each have that sort of fairly unique kind of probabilistic range of selling. So I guess the other thing to say on that is that kind of ladders up nicely to what you guys were saying earlier about why have a website, and I think you were saying like conversion machine, like that's what it's there for. It channels in at the end of the funnel and it's there to kind of turn it into something you can act on tangible. And so like you're saying, the key metrics to really be looking at, keeping a close eye on VDPs per session, leads per session, that's what it's there to do. And
yep.
any other metric, right, is going to impact that. Are your bounce rates too high? It's going to impact that. So that's almost the starting point, as you said, those two headline metrics. Then you do your diagnostics from that. Okay, what's driving it going up and down and whatnot. That's great. So again, thinking about that, putting myself kind of in the dealer's shoes and thinking, okay, so I know I need a website, know kind of what I need to keep an eye on that website and what it's there to do. And then you're kind of faced with obviously the option of who do I partner with for this? I mean, there's so many different kind of website vendors out there, and slightly different ways of doing it and whatever. I mean, the way technology is, it moves very fast, obviously these days. But there is going to be an element of kind of homogenous sort of feature sets across a few different kind of websites. So for the dealership kind of sitting there, either they currently have a website or they're maybe looking to change it for some reason. To what degree are kind of all these website providers sort of fairly similar? Are they the same? And if they're not, how would you advise a dealer to sort of make a meaningful comparison between providers without perhaps getting too lost in the kind of the feature list kind of comparison tables and all this kind of thing? If you had to boil it down to maybe 3 or 4 things, if you were a dealer and you're making a decision about website partner, what are those 3 or 4 key things that you guys would be looking at and thinking about in making your decision?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, it's customer service. All right, it's if you look at cancellations, almost always people don't cancel because it's a product is missing a specific feature. It's almost always the customer service is lacking. Right. So customer service is number one. I'd always say that. When you look at a website provider, look at that. That's absolutely key. Next up, I'd say platform flexibility. All right. So speed to innovate. What kind of competitive advantage does that provider drive? Those things are critical. And then also, if you have ideas, and that goes together with customer service, how open is this provider to be able to facilitate those ideas and work with you to be able to bring these ideas to market? I'd say, we've touched on this, but deep analytics integration. So GA integration, this is a little bit more for the sophisticated dealers and dealer groups. You'd want to be able, and specifically if you're running your own campaigns, you'd want to be able to pull those insights out. So that is absolutely critical, and you've got to have a flexible platform in order to do that. Consumer engagement on site, so searchability, sortability, filters, customizing inventory, personalization, all of those aspects in there. We're kind of going to the little bit more kind of functional level. And then I kind of ended with the last two, and that would be kind of performance, stability, and security. That's always critical in a platform. You want to have fast sites. You want to have sites that remain up, right? If the site's not up, what's the point of having a website? And then amplification methods. So you'd want to be able to bring consumers back in. So, mechanisms for a consumer to save vehicles, save searches, and so forth, and then send out the alerts, get those consumers back in. I'd end it there. That's probably kind of the main list of items that I'd recommend a dealer look at.
Yeah,
okay, that's manageable.
I would echo, I think, a lot of what Mike said. I really look at for dealers that are going to look into the market and make a decision on who to partner with. I think there's 3 decision points. One is the tech stack, and Mike alluded to a lot of that stuff and those important aspects of the technology stack. Service, without question, absolute critical. I really believe that as well. Are you just partnering with a supplier because you like the technology, or are you getting a real partnership, somebody that's going to link arms, drive strategy, bring back results, make recommendations on an ongoing basis? That service component is critical. And then third, it goes without saying, but price is absolutely important. Make sure that you're going to get a good bang for your buck. Is the technology and the service aligned with the proposition from a pricing perspective? Those would be the 3 decision points I think that dealers should maybe think through as they're looking and exploring. And maybe just one last thing, Ian, if I may. I'm finding just over the last 3 weeks, and I think it's perhaps because there is a little bit of downtime and dealers they're finding the time in their schedules to actually look at what they're doing and examine in greater detail all of the different elements of their site, whether that's getting into data analysis or just surfing their own site. And they're finding imperfections. And I know our own service team has had great dialogue with dealers, just from dealers spending the time to inspect their own site. And that is, I think, critical, right? It's not always, do I need to pick up the phone and call another supplier? Sometimes just get on the phone with your supplier. Hey, and notice that, this function's not working, or can we build out a landing page? I want to talk about this, what I'm doing in my service drive. And the partner needs to be there to support that, make recommendations on best practices and so forth. So I think it's all of those things combined.
That's if I can interject this. Sorry, Ian, that's a fantastic point. If there's one simple thing I'd leave dealers with to do after they've listened to us chat, is to go through their sites and go through a consumer journey. Validate that your messaging is on point, right? Because your messaging now has changed. In your emails, are your footers on point? That message has to be, it has to be fluent throughout the site. So go through all the different journeys across your site. Ensure that all that messaging, all your messages are in fact aligned with how you're doing business right now. Critical.
That's a great point, and it loops back to what you were saying earlier about the whole kind of empathy side of things with the website. It was, anybody who's involved in any kind of digital enterprise, which is, let's face it, most enterprises have a digital element these days, but just being able to take a step back and sort of go through a journey, put yourself in the shoes of the user, and we do this on the marketplace as well. Put yourself in their shoes, try and go through a journey and really kind of think of it, come at it with fresh eyes. And it's like you said, Matt, looking at it from that perspective, I think you'll realize this is way too interruptive. Why have I got this thing coming out and trying to interrupt the user when, what I'm trying to do here is search for this car and kind of read about this car view the pictures, and maybe submit a lead. So now having the time for a little bit of housekeeping, it's like, yeah, make great use of this time if you do have a little bit of time to as you said, go through a bunch of journeys as if you were a user and be critical of your own experience, and think of it that way, as opposed to, you know, as advertisers and kind of business owners, sometimes we can be so keen to, I want to let them know about this offer and this offer, and, you know, I really want to push this, and it can become quite sort of unempathetic to what the user's trying to achieve.
It also shouldn't end at the website, right? The one thing that we haven't discussed, which is also incredibly critical, that's your Google My Business profile, right? Are your times still correct?
Oh, this is huge.
Like, everything. Like, take a look at your descriptions. Take a look at your presence, right? I think that's maybe the better way of stating is your online presence across different channels.
That's a great point. I was on a call with a dealer last week, a dealer group, lots of stores, and I was on one of my Google My Business profiles, and they had updated it to say dealership name, COVID hours below.
Right.
Brilliant. Yeah. Right in the headline. Brilliant. So when I was talking to the marketing director, I complimented him. I said, that's fantastic that you went to that detail, given the amount of rooftops that you have to manage those for that. And he said, yeah, well, you know, that's our lend, or that's our connection point to consumers right now, is, you know, is just through virtual means. So we thought it was important to do that. I said, that's brilliant.
It sure is. Yeah. I mean, even in like a lot of this stuff, it's even in your own life kind of thing. You know, you look at a restaurant or something and the hours aren't right, or, you know, you go somewhere, it's, oh, well, the hours may be different on a certain day. It's like, yeah, update the Google My Business. That's where people go tangibly before they sit foot out the door to check if you're open or not.
And right now too, like most people, like I found myself recently doing a Google search, and I wonder if the hours are actually real. Like, it was in transparency, it was dry cleaning. So I was like, I gotta go pick up my dry clean. So I Googled them to see if they were open, but I was like, I wonder if they've updated that. It might not be. They might be closed. But you know, it just signals to the consumer that you're being thoughtful about the circumstance, and it is real. What it does say.
For sure. No, that's great advice. So changing gear a little bit here. So, you know, even before this whole pandemic situation, there was, you know, digital retailing, right? So we talked about the website being the conversion machine and this kind of thing. And one of the new sort of frontiers of dealership websites and automotive generally was this kind of increasing, you know, kind of slow march, I guess, towards digital retailing and being able to complete much more of the transaction online rather than in the dealership there. And, you know, from the research that we've done over the years, and I'm sure it's no surprise to dealerships either, one of the pain points for users is the amount of time that they have to spend in the showroom on paperwork and so forth to actually sort of complete transactions. And so the more of that they can do from the comfort of their home, the more they can enjoy the dealership visit, and it's picking up keys, and it's the good stuff. So that's all kind of, you know, pre-COVID. But from that standpoint, so I know that you guys have been doing a lot of work just lately. Because of COVID, it's kind of accelerated this demand for digital retailing, and rightly so, because, you know, people shouldn't be leaving their homes and that kind of stuff. But what sort of how do you see the impact of digital retailing on a dealership website, and maybe what are a couple of the success stories that you've seen even in the past few weeks of dealers who are doing it right, and any kind of learnings that you have from, you know, you're going through a lot of this now, getting a lot of dealers up to speed with digital retailing, more so than usual. So I guess it's an interesting time to kind of talk about it a little bit.
Sure. Great subject. I mean, it's one that I'm spending a majority of my time on recently. And it's been very encouraging to see the willingness on the dealer's behalf to, in a moment of a crisis, to reinvent themselves and look for tools to be able to help them with that. Mm-hmm. What I'd like to say before I get into what a proper flow is that digital retailing is not a function that just captures leads. And I think that dealers need to be conscious of that, right? There is a lot of great tools that are available to dealers for many different reasons. Those tools are fantastic and they offer value to dealers. But a proper digital retailing solution is not just a lead capture function. And I think that the industry ought to agree on that. Okay.
Yeah.
What digital retailing is, however, is providing tools to the consumer that offer transparency into programs that are available at the VIN level, whether that's leasing, financing, cash, different incentives associated to those programs, options. Most of the time, there's multiple options in each of those categories, and offering that information to the consumer while they're still making decisions on which vehicle they're looking to purchase and who they want to purchase from is part of digital retailing. Okay. And that doesn't necessarily mean lead capture, right? Grabbing the information of the individual. It means offering more information and a set of tools for them to be able to navigate through that, and building out a deal structure that meets their needs from an affordability perspective, from a timeline perspective, and then adds additional functions that enable them to potentially layer in other facets that they would otherwise do in the store, such as accessories, right? Protection plans, warranties. These are all things that proper digital retailing solutions available in market can offer the consumer. And the benefit to the dealer is that you're warming up the consumer on these different things that you're going to try and sell to them later when you're at the final stage of the transaction. It may not be that you're selling them those products right then and there, but you've got a first pass to explain what some of those products are and the value proposition behind them. Okay. And then secondly, trade. There are many trade-in products available to dealers in the market, and a lot of them are great. And a lot of them use great data sets, and they offer the dealer the ability to get into conversations with consumers on trade valuations. And I think that's great. But when you actually feature the trade appraisal tool inside of that build and price workflow, now we're talking about digital retailing, right? And there are some tools out there that for that trade-in and appraisal process will directly integrate with other software tools that dealers use inside their operations, such as vAuto. And that enables the dealer to still have some control over the number that's going to be served back through the digital retailing transactional workflow to the consumer. And it's interactive. And it's more accurate when you get to the final stages of the transaction. The dealers played a role in that. That is proper digital retailing as opposed to sort of a widget-based lead capture model. And I think that there is a distinction that has evolved. There are sort of two different ways to go, digital retailing. And I just hope that dealers, as they're assessing this space, start to understand the differences in the value proposition between those things in market.
Yeah, I would caution dealers to understand that difference, right? It's that super lead, right? So it's a widget that provides you a super lead with some additional information versus an actual process, right? Which is a digital retailing process where you actually go through, you configure, you choose your F&I components, etc. Very, very vast distinction.
Yeah,
maybe the other thing, Ian, if I can, just one other, I think, critical distinction here. Of the tools that are available that enable that sort of build and price workflow where you can select different payment parameters and whatnot, the data accuracy. Okay. Where is the data coming from with the particular provider that you might be looking at from a dealer perspective? Is it coming direct from the OEM, or is it coming through a third party? And if it's coming through a third party, how does it match to the inventory and the price profile that you have on your inventory on your website? Do those two things connect, or is there a variation? And if there's variation, then that's going to interrupt the consumer journey. So I think that is another really important item that dealers assess and investigate as they're in the process of researching.
I think that's a great point. It's like you mentioned earlier with false and proper kind of digital retailing, as we're calling it. It's about giving the user more comfort and confidence with the kind of conversations that you're going to have with the salesperson or whatever, so that it's not, the first time they're seeing these options or these kind of finance arrangements or whatever is right there in the dealership. I got to go away and think about it. The idea is that they've been through the process online already. They've seen what the different options are and all that kind of stuff. So it's about building that confidence in the user. And I think that's such a good point. What you said is, man, if data points and things aren't aligning across that digital retailing piece and what's actually on the website and things, there's no quicker way to lose confidence, a consumer's confidence, than these things aren't lining up. Like, is this thing real? I don't know how far to go with this thing. Can I trust it? So yeah, I think that's really key. Yeah. Great point. So, I mean, speaking of that, I know that for kind of dealers watching this and digital retailing, I mean, I think it's a key point, like you mentioned, to point out that, like anything, it is a bit of a buzzword at the moment, if you like. And so there's going to be lots of different things calling themselves digital retailing or masquerading in that way. So I think it's so useful that you've clearly outlined there what is digital retailing and what is kind of a pretender, really, to the throne. But at Trader Corporation, I mean, what are we kind of doing to help dealers sort of through this time get accelerated with getting their digital retailing started, be that on a website with us or other websites? I mean, what are you kind of talking to dealers about, Matt, out there in the market at the moment that want to get started?
Yeah, right now, Ian, as you know, I mean, we're working really fast and at a rapid pace at our organization, trying to make decisions on many different things. But one of the things that is consistent in all of the conversations, and this one included, is how can we help dealers, right? It's everything that we are going to work to do every day right now is with the intention of trying to help as many dealers as we possibly can get through this crisis period. And so, specific to digital retailing, with our partners at Moto Insight, been working very closely with the team there, and we have offered different types of payment programs to dealers to be able to help them through from a cash perspective. We're trying to be very flexible with dealers, understanding that they're challenged right now, and not limit the ability to have these tools and offer that type of experience and enable those virtual transactions to take place. The response has been incredible. I don't think that the Moto Insight team has ever been so busy on all facets of their business, the sales team, the service and support team, and the onboarding team too. But it's a great problem to have, and we're throwing resources over there so that we can support the dealers, move dealers through quickly and get them up live as fast as we possibly can. And that, I don't think that's going to stop. And I think over the next number of months, we're going to need to continue to be flexible with dealers. We're definitely open to that. The response has been great. And I'll tell you what's also happening and been very encouraging to see is the amount of OEMs that are reaching out to have conversations about how we can come together as partners to support the dealers. That's been very encouraging as well. And we're more than happy to continue to work with the agency partners, with the OEMs directly, and then obviously with our dealer partners, and help them leverage these tools, not just for the purpose of COVID operations, but beyond that. I think we all agree that beyond this crisis period, dealers are going to continue to need to augment the way they do business, and we're definitely along for the ride there, and looking forward to supporting them with that.
Right. Yeah. So kind of now's the time. I know obviously everybody knows that kind of on the marketplace side, we've waived all the fees for April and May in the interest of supporting the industry that we're a part of and kind of getting through this thing. And so for the audience out there, they're interested in digital retailing, that the message is kind of, now's a good time because we're trying to make this as accessible as possible, be that, flexibility or offers or whatever it is. one thing I was going to ask you, Matt, and I'm kind of interested myself, I feel like, I've seen some messaging out there in the market. There's some vendors kind of, they're promising, extremely fast kind of turnaround times to get started with digital retailing and this kind of thing. And you almost look at it and think, like, could that be possible? I mean, from your perspective, obviously, as someone who has been doing a lot of activations and getting, dozens of dealers cooking on this, what's a realistic kind of time frame to get live, and why is it that it does take that amount of time, as opposed to it's not just a flick of a switch and there you go, you have digital retailing on your website tomorrow type thing?
Yeah, it's a great point. Yes, there are some that are just turning dealers on, but I'll tell you what the difference is.
Right.
When they're just turning them on, it's just activating the build and price function, which takes OEM data and it then flows that in at the vehicle level and then offers that build and price sort of experience. That is very different from a fulsome and comprehensive digital retail workflow. And so with our solution, we have to enable all of the OEM programs to flow through at the VIN level. But then we have to make sure that they're aligned with how the dealer wants to present things like MSRP, OEM discount, dealer discount. Okay. And there's a lot of complexity that goes into that. And every dealer is different. They have a different strategy. It's not just turn a switch. You've got to custom configure this stuff. And then you've got to work with them to understand what accessories do you want to promote? And accessories at the VIN level, are they properly residualized, or are we just going to have static accessories that we present? Then you've got protection plans and warranties, right? Again, which ones apply to different types of transactions, whether it's lease, finance, or cash? And how do the rates adjust based on those parameters? That takes customization and configuration upfront. And that all takes time and work. Then taking the bill of sale and understanding how everything flows through down the transaction and making sure that aligns with how the deals are being built. So it's not a flick of a switch. It takes time and resources to be able to configure that custom to the dealer's operation. Then we need to create the script, give it to the website partner that the dealer is using. The website partner needs to then integrate that script into that dealer's website. And depending on the website supplier's support queue, sometimes it can sit there for a little while. And then training on the back-end tools. And, one of the things that we offer is a portal, but also a showroom functionality that enables dealers to do desking in operation and then take transactions from an offline physical sort of workflow to a virtual workflow online, and training the dealers on all of that, setting that up. So it's not just flicking the switch. It takes us, if a dealer's got nice, clean inventory with style IDs and all of the technical items at the inventory level, then, we can turn a dealer on in 2 or 3 weeks. If the inventory doesn't have a lot of data at the VIN level, then it takes a bit of work to get that up to speed. And so maybe it's more like 3 or 4 weeks, but that's roughly about our average, which is roughly industry standard with full solution providers.
Okay, yeah. I mean, it sounds like all the things going into that, you'd actually want to take a bit of time because you want to do these things correctly. But sort of less haste, more speed. Do the thing correctly, get it set up, and also to that point, this is a way of doing business that was coming anyway, is going to be accelerated by the current situation, and all the research that we're seeing from consumers is going to say this is how I want to buy cars, like more so than ever, just because of this thing. But it's the way it was going anyway. So take the time, kind of set it up right. As you said, 2 to 3 weeks is still sort of pretty quick, it feels like to me. But then you're fully kind of good to go. You got the training and all the other elements that you mentioned, as opposed to sort of being tempted into, well, let's just flick this switch and it's there tomorrow, but probably not going to get a lot of value out of it because it hasn't been set up and customized, and your people aren't trained on it, and all that kind of good stuff. So
that's right.
Good advice.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. Well, I think we're sort of just on the hour here, guys. So I think we'll probably wrap up at this point. But it's been a fantastic sort of hour. I've learned a lot about dealership websites and the area of the business that you guys focus in on. And I think for those watching, a lot of really kind of strong takeaways from this. You know, the website it's your representation to the world, because all consumers will be researching you online. And so this is your presence, your own website. It's the conversion machine, as we sort of heard. I think one of the great takeaways was kind of, you know, especially during this time, if you do have a little bit more time on your hands, being the user and being kind of empathetic to that, not just the website. Act as if you were a user that was kind of researching buying a car at your dealership for the first time. Where would you go? What would you do? Look at the messaging, look at the touch points, maybe a bit of housekeeping, make sure that the UX is good, everything is accurate and clean. I think that was kind of great advice. And then lastly, on the digital retailing piece, I think this one's super critical at this time because, as I mentioned, it's the buzzword. You're seeing it everywhere. There's lots of kind of solutions masquerading as digital retailing. So according to the guy's advice, make sure it is true digital retailing. Don't be tempted by something which sounds like just kind of a souped up lead form. Make sure it's true digital retailing and hold those vendors to account on that point. And then lastly, as you were saying, it's kind of, if you're going to do it, take the time, do it properly. Sort of don't be tempted into flicking on something that's not optimal and probably won't deliver a lot of value just because it's kind of quick. Take the time, do it properly, because it is going to become a staple of the way people buy cars moving forward. So you got to do it. So thanks very much for the time, guys. That was great. I think the last thing as well to any customers or just dealerships in general that are watching is, if you would like to work with these fine gentlemen or even just talk to them about your website, go to go.trader.ca, click on websites. There's a form there that you can fill out. It's called a lead form, but it doesn't mean that you're actually, you know, you're going to have to buy anything or anything like that. Just a conversation as well is fine, but it's one way to get in touch with us, and we can hook you up with these guys and their teams to talk more about your dealership website and some of the things you should be looking at. Especially kind of during this time. So listen, great. Thank you very much, chaps.
Thanks guys.
Ian.
Great
Thanks,
to
Matt.
see you guys. Have a
Yeah.
great weekend.
Awesome.
All right. Thank you
Have a good
very
one.
much. See you next time, everybody.
Guys.
Thanks.